Someone once told me, the worst kind of trap is the one everyone watches happen and still thinks it's entertainment. That's exactly what happened the day Wendy Williams interviewed Diddy. Millions tuned in, laughing, clapping, convinced it was just another celebrity segment. But I wasn't watching from home. I was there, sitting in the audience, close enough to see something no camera caught, close enough to feel the room shift when Wendy's smile collapsed. People think they saw an interview, but I watched a man reach into a woman's spirit and take something she never got back. I never meant for talk shows to become a habit. It started as a joke, something I did once with a friend back when we were broke, bored, and desperate to feel close to the world we watched on TV. But something about sitting in a studio audience did something to me. The lights, the music cues, the frantic producers waving their arms, the glossy sets that looked bigger on camera. I loved every part of it. Most people don't realize it's free. You sign up online, show up early, and suddenly you're part of a tiny fraction of the world who sees TV before it's polished, edited and packaged for millions. I love that. The rawness of it, the messy human side of TV, and somehow, out of every show I visited, The View, Tamron Hall, Dr. Oz, even Fallon that one time, I always ended up right back at the Wendy Williams show. There was something different about Wendy's studio. The audience coordinators knew how to make you feel like family. The warm-up comedian always cracked jokes that weren't safe for daytime TV, and Wendy herself, she was unpredictable, unfiltered, and fun as hell to watch up close. Half the thrill was not knowing which version of her you'd get that day. After a while, I became a regular. The kind of person who knew which side of the audience got on camera more often, who knew where the AC vents blasted too cold, who knew which security guard snuck people granola bars if they skipped breakfast. This studio, Wendy's studio, felt like a strange little second home, but that day, the day that still sits in my chest like a stone. It was different from the moment I walked in. I arrived early, earlier than usual, because word had spread that Diddy was going to be the guest. I'd never seen him in person, not once. For all the celebrities I'd been near, he always seemed like someone who existed behind a higher wall, part of a tier of fame that didn't get near regular people anymore. So yeah, I was excited enough to wait outside the studio in the cold with a coffee that didn't warm anything except my hands. But as soon as the doors opened, my excitement dissolved into something tight and uneasy. The staff wasn't smiling. That was the first sign. Everyone behind the check-in table looked distracted, tense, like they were being watched by someone just out of sight. Usually they greeted us with, "Good morning," and "Welcome back," and "You wore the perfect color today. You're going to look great on camera." But today was silence. A nod, a wristband. Next, security was different too. Heavier presence, bigger guys, no familiar faces, and they didn't joke, didn't scan people casually. They studied us, their eyes cold, their expressions carved from granite. I remember thinking it felt like walking into a courthouse, not a talk show. Inside the lobby, the usual pre-show energy was gone. Normally, it sounded like a cafeteria, people laughing, comparing selfies, whispering about who the guest might be. But today, the entire room sounded like a church before a funeral. Just shuffling feet and quiet conversation that died the second you looked toward it. I rubbed my arms without thinking. The place felt colder than normal. When they finally let us into the studio, I headed straight for my favorite spot, center left, 3 rows back. But even as I sat, something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it. The air felt thick somehow, pressurized, like walking into a room where someone had been arguing a minute before you entered. I glanced at the woman next to me. She looked nervous too, twisting the straps of her purse. "First time?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, it just feels weird today." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The warm-up comedian eventually jogged out, but he was off from the start. He fumbled his opening line, laughed too loudly at his own jokes, and kept glancing toward the wings like someone was giving him silent instructions. He wiped sweat from his forehead even though the studio was cold enough to see your breath if you exhaled just right. That had never happened. Ever. Then something even stranger happened. Wendy came out early. She almost never did that. Usually she waited backstage until the cameras were rolling. But today, she stepped out into the dim studio, holding her note cards, scanning the audience with a tight smile that didn't touch her eyes. She didn't wave. She didn't laugh. She didn't even walk her usual walk. Her gaze kept drifting toward an unlit corner at the back of the studio. Her face tightened each time she looked there, as if someone was standing in the darkness, staring back. But when I followed her gaze, nothing was there. A producer hurried over and whispered something in Wendy's ear. She flinched like it hurt. Her hand jerked, dropping half her cards onto the floor. The producer bent to pick them up, and Wendy's eyes darted across the audience like she was checking for someone. I felt a ripple in my stomach, a quiet, instinctive warning. I've been to dozens of tapings. I know when a host is tired or grumpy or distracted. This wasn't that. This was fear, deep, quiet, practiced fear. The crew seemed terrified too. A stagehand dropped a prop and whispered a curse. Another producer paced back and forth, muttering urgently into a headset. An audio tech unplugged and replugged the same cable over and over, hands shaking. Something was brewing behind the scenes. Something big, something bad. When the cameras finally rolled, Wendy tried to slip into her usual persona, but even that felt distorted. She stumbled over her monologue, laughed too loudly, smiled too tightly, and every few seconds she glanced back toward that same shadowed corner, as if checking whether something had moved closer. I leaned forward, the hairs on my arms rising. I wasn't imagining this. The whole room felt wrong, like the studio itself was holding its breath. I didn't know it then, but the feeling had a reason, a very specific reason. Every instinct in me whispered the same thing. Something is coming. And whatever it was coming for Wendy. Diddy stepped onto the stage like the room belonged to him. Music hit, the audience roared, and for a moment I got swept into it. The loudness, the shock of seeing him this close, the heat of all those bodies leaning forward at once. But underneath the cheers, something felt off. The clapping wasn't random, human, messy. It was synchronized, like a choir keeping time they'd never rehearsed. Some people were excited, sure, but a few looked uneasy. A woman near the aisle pulled her coat tight like she was cold. A man rubbed his forearm, frowning. Someone else whispered, "Do you feel that?" before catching themselves. But me, I was excited. This was Diddy, a legend, and he was 20 feet away. The moment he reached Wendy's desk, though, excitement shifted into something else. His shadow didn't move like a shadow. It lagged behind him for half a second, long enough to notice, then snapped back into place like it had been yanked. Wendy welcomed him warmly, laughing that big, familiar Wendy laugh. But her eyes tracked him like she was bracing for a wave only she could feel. "You started covering our culture before anybody else," Diddy said. "This is a full circle moment." When he said full circle, the phrase echoed inside my skull like a loop, like a ring. I shook it off. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the mics were weird. Wendy did the shoe cam next, Saint Laurent, and the conversation went into familiar Wendy territory. Diamonds in his teeth, Goyard suit, how he smelled good enough to make the audience giggle. But every time Wendy laughed, something in my body tightened, a pressure in my ribs, a faint ringing in my ears. Her laugh didn't feel free. It felt like it was being pulled out of her. And then the fasting segment. Diddy talked about going through Ramadan with his friends, focusing on what he put inside himself. The studio temperature dropped so fast I saw someone rub their arms. The lights above them dimmed a shade before humming back to normal. When he said, "I've been really caring about what I put inside of me," the hair on the back of my neck rose. It felt like he wasn't talking about food. I kept telling myself to stay calm, I'd wanted to see this man in person for years. I wasn't going to freak myself out because the lighting guy missed a cue, but the unease in the room was growing. Wendy kept smoothing her wig, flipping note cards she didn't read from, laughing hard, then snapping into silence. They showed party footage, hundreds of people in his mansion, flashing lights, bodies packed in a beautiful chaos. Wendy joked about Alyssa Milano being robbed by her business manager. Diddy said, "My mother keeps my vibrations safe." The moment that word, vibration, came out, the floor beneath my seat hummed. Not loudly, just enough to feel like something big was passing under the building. A man in the audience whispered, "What the?" then stopped when his wife elbowed him. We went through the stories, his kids, his twins, his baby moms, how he met them all around the same time Wendy teased him, and he laughed, but his laugh had two layers to it. One normal, one deeper, a resonance that pressed against my rib cage. Then came the twin segment. Wendy was grinning ear to ear talking about them, but Diddy watched her too closely, his smile tight, his eyes calculating. The woman in front of me kept glancing toward the exit. Another guy wiped sweat from his brow, even though the studio was freezing. I tried to stay excited. I tried to keep telling myself, "You're here, enjoy it." Then the movie clip played. Those few minutes of darkness should have been a break in the tension, but it wasn't. I used the moment to scan the room. A producer was wiping tears. Another clutched his headset so tightly his knuckles went white. The warm-up guy wasn't smiling. Something was wrong, and everyone backstage knew it. When the clip ended, Wendy leaned forward, smiling warm and motherly. As the mother of a now 16-year-old, who I met backstage, he's a great young man. The second she said, "my son," something in the room collapsed. The lights dimmed, the air thickened, my stomach turned, and Diddy's eyes, dear God, his eyes went black. Not shadows, not pupils dilating black, like looking into the center of a tunnel with no end. It lasted less than a blink, but I saw it. I know I saw it. Wendy didn't flinch. She didn't pause. She kept talking with that TV smile. But underneath I saw it. The way her shoulders slackened, the way her voice thinned out, the way her spirit, yes, spirit, seemed to dim, like someone turning down a light inside her. The audience didn't notice at all. They laughed on cue. They clapped when the applause sign blinked. People wiped tears from laughing as if nothing unnatural had happened. But I felt it. I felt something moving between them, something hungry. Diddy talked about programming positive images. The word program vibrated through my bones. Two women in the audience stared forward, unblinking, like mannequins, Wendy joked, but her eyes looked distant, glassier than usual. They took a shot of Ciroc next. The smell of alcohol hit me, but behind it was the scent of burnt copper, like someone had microwaved metal. Diddy leaned in. His mic barely picked up the words. "Ask me anything." But what I heard wasn't one voice. It was two. One human. One deep, ancient, layered under the other like a whisper rising from the floorboards. Then the biggie question. The studio froze. Air stilled. Wendy asked if he felt responsible. Diddy spoke softly, calmly, about regret, fate, God's plan. And something happened. A flicker in the air, a black shimmer, thin as a thread, stretching between them. Wendy's shoulders dropped. Her face slackened. Her energy sank. He wasn't talking about losing spirit. He was talking about taking it. And Wendy didn't even know. But I saw it. I saw it all. The show wrapped shortly after. Wendy smiled, thanked him, clapped with the audience. She was perfect, professional, polished. If you watched it from home, you'd think she was fine. But when the cameras cut, she didn't stumble dramatically. She didn't faint. She just slowed, like something was unplugged inside her. She walked off stage calm, composed, every step steady, but her aura, her presence, looked dimmer, drained. No one else noticed. They gathered their purses, laughed, snapped selfies, but I remained seated, breath frozen in my throat. Everyone saw a flawless performance. Everyone saw a normal interview. But I watched a woman lose something she never got back. And as Wendy disappeared behind the curtain, I felt something inside me whisper, "Follow her," and I did. My legs moved before I consciously decided to. I slid down the far left aisle, merging into a group of interns pushing carts of props toward the back. None of them looked at me. They were panicked, whispering urgently, their eyes darting like prey animals. Backstage felt colder, darker. The lights were dimmer here, humming softly, like they were fighting to stay lit. There was a vibration under my shoes, a low mechanical rumble, or maybe just the building breathing. I didn't know. Nothing felt normal. I kept my head down, grabbed a random clipboard off a table, and walked with purpose. That's all it took. No one questioned me. No one even registered my existence. Everyone was too busy reacting to whatever happened on stage. A producer paced with a headset, muttering, she's fine. Nobody say anything yet." Another woman sat on a crate, mascara streaking down her cheeks. A security guard blocked a hallway, barking into a walkie-talkie. I slid into a side corridor where the air turned sharp and cold. This was the hallway, the one that led to the guest rooms, the dressing rooms. The room where Wendy always took off her heels, drank her tea, and breathed after giving her soul to the cameras. I moved quietly. Every step felt heavier, like gravity thickened near each wall. The studio's glamour didn't exist back here. The walls were beige, scratched. The carpet was thin and stained. It was the TV world stripped bare, ugly, real, exposed. And then I saw her name. Wendy Williams printed on a piece of taped paper, corners curling. The door was cracked open. That was wrong. Wendy always kept her door shut, locked even. She didn't like random people walking in while she changed or decompressed. She once told an audience member backstage tour, "This room is my sanctuary. No one enters unless I say so." But today, the door sat open like someone fled through it. My hand shook as I pushed it wider. Inside, Wendy was sitting at her vanity, not upright, not poised, not the Wendy Williams the world knew. She was hunched forward, elbows on the desk, holding a cup with both hands. The liquid inside trembled. Her wig sat slightly crooked. Her shoulders sagged as if her spine forgot how to hold her. She looked like a balloon slowly losing air. The room felt thick, as if grief itself had taken physical form. One lamp flickered. The air was stale, unmoving. When she turned to look at me, it wasn't with surprise. It wasn't with annoyance. It was like she'd already expected someone to find her like this. "How did you get in here?" she asked softly. Her voice was strained, weak, but not confused, not hectic, just diminished. I needed to see if you were okay," I whispered. I saw something out there. Something was wrong. At the word wrong, her eyes flickered with recognition. Not fear, recognition. "Close the door," she said. I did. She set the cup down with a shaky breath. Her hands trembled. "You saw it," she said quietly. "Didn't you?" I swallowed hard. "I think so." "What did you see?" she asked, eyes drilling into me. "I saw you fading," I said. "I saw something leave you." Wendy closed her eyes for a long moment as if the truth pained her physically. "I had a plan," she whispered. "Today was supposed to be the day." My heart thumped. "What plan?" "I was going to expose him," she said. "In my own way. In Wendy language, I had stories, receipts. You know me. I always have receipts." Her voice cracked into a sad laugh. "But the second he brought up my son," she said, blinking hard, everything in my mind went blank. I lost my footing, my rhythm, my courage, myself. I felt a chill run through me because I remembered that moment. I remembered the air shifting. "He said your son was a great young man," I said. "That wasn't a compliment," she whispered. "That was a warning." The room seemed to darken around us. And then, she continued, voice trembling, "I saw it." "Saw what?" "His eyes," she whispered, leaning forward. "They went black." My breath caught in my chest. "I saw it too," I said, my voice cracking. "I thought I imagined it." She shook her head slowly. No, you didn't imagine anything. When he shows the black eyes, it means he's taking feeding. It means you've crossed a line. She looked down at her trembling hands like they belonged to someone else. I got diddied, she whispered. What does that mean? My voice came out thin. Wendy's lips tightened into a sad, defeated line. It means he took something from me, she said. Not money, not fame, not opportunity. She pressed a hand to her chest. He took something from in here. She shut her eyes, breathing shallow. You tell the truth about him. He comes for something you can't get back, and it's always the thing you value most. My mind reeled. Today, she whispered, he came for my spirit. She rubbed the center of her chest with her fingertips. It feels like a hole, she said, a cold one. I didn't know what to say. The Wendy Williams sitting in front of me wasn't a TV legend. She wasn't the gossip queen, the unshakable diva, the woman who survived scandals and studios. She looked like someone who'd been spiritually mugged. I shouldn't have let him back on this stage, she said, tears filling her eyes but not falling. He's been trying to silence me since the 90s. Every time I said his name, something cracked in my life. She chuckled darkly. And today was a full circle moment, all right? Just not the one he pretended it was. She turned toward me, her eyes dimmer than before. You saw his eyes, she said. That means you're on his radar now. I froze. You need to leave. And don't ever sit in another audience. They don't protect people like us. Her voice dropped to a rasp. Get out before anyone sees you talking to me. I backed toward the door, heart pounding, the weight of her warning cutting into me like ice. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her aura, once loud, flamboyant, vibrant, was barely a flicker now. As I stepped into the hallway, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I hadn't just seen a celebrity interview. I witnessed a ritual, a spiritual extraction, a theft. And Wendy Williams didn't just lose energy that day. She lost something sacred, something she never got back. And now, I wasn't sure I would either. I didn't feel my legs as I walked out of Wendy's dressing room. I wasn't even sure I was breathing. The hallway outside her door felt warped somehow, too narrow, too bright, like the lights were trying to burn the memory out of me. Before I reached the exit, producers brushed past me, laughing, clipboards slapping against their palms, headsets still crackling with notes. To them, everything was routine. Another show finished. Another celebrity interview in the books. But to me, the whole building felt wrong. Like the walls themselves remembered what Diddy had done to her and wanted to forget it. I pushed through a side door and stepped out onto the street, gulping the air as if I'd been underwater. For a moment, the world looked normal again. Traffic lights blinking, taxis honking, tourists posing by the studio sign. Normal, too normal. My Uber was 3 minutes away. I stood there shaking, hands buried in my pockets to hide the tremble. And then I felt it, that vibration again. The same low, unnatural hum that washed through the studio moments before Wendy's spirit dimmed. Engines, heavy ones. A convoy of 5 black SUVs turned the corner, slow and deliberate, like predators circling prey. People on the sidewalk barely glanced. New York sees everything, cares about nothing. But the convoy slowed near me. The middle SUV rolled its tinted window down just halfway, and there he was, Diddy, his face half lit by passing streetlights, expression calm but hollow, as if someone had carved it out of stone. He didn't smile, didn't glare. He just looked at me, deeply, as if he recognized me, as if he knew I'd seen more than the cameras allowed. The stare wasn't human. It wasn't even threatening. It was claiming. My chest tightened. A cold pressure crept up my spine. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. All I could do was watch as the SUV rolled past, window closing with a soft, final click. That was the moment I knew. My days of attending talk shows were over. Something innocent in me died right there on that sidewalk. A curiosity I'd carried since I was young, a joy I used to feel sitting in those bright, happy studios gone. My Uber pulled up, but I didn't speak the whole ride home. That night rewrote my life. A week later, I turned on the TV, and Wendy looked different, softer around the edges, tired, her smile harder to hold, her eyes unfocused for a split second before snapping back into their on-camera mask viewers didn't notice. But I did. I'd seen that change begin, and I knew what caused it. Over the next months, it only got worse. She fainted on live television. She slurred her words. She walked as if her body didn't fully belong to her anymore. Episodes were canceled with vague excuses. Rumors spread, substances, stress, breakdowns. But none of it was true. Her spirit had been drained. Then came the hospitalization headlines, then the guardianship, then the dementia diagnosis, then the financial freeze, then the disappearance. People mocked her in comments, clowned her on Instagram, called her washed up, crazy, gone. But all I could think was, she's not sick. She's emptied. The same emptiness I saw in her dressing room, the dimming, the sagging posture, the slow collapse of something invisible but vital, was now visible to the whole world. They were watching the aftermath of a ritual they never knew happened. I tried to let it go. I avoided TV studios, stopped watching celebrity interviews, stopped telling anyone what I'd seen. But sometimes at night, my bedroom lights flicker. The same way the studio lights flickered when Diddy walked out. Sometimes I hear a low hum beneath my mattress, the same hum I felt behind my ribs when his eyes went black. And sometimes when I catch my reflection unexpectedly, I see something move behind my own eyes, something dark, something that isn't entirely me. You saw what you weren't supposed to see. The sentence haunts me. Not spoken aloud, just felt as if lodged somewhere deep in my memory. Wendy eventually vanished from TV entirely. No goodbye episode, no farewell tribute, no closure, just silence. Life moved on. The internet forgot. The world shifted to new scandals, but I never let it go. One night, years after that taping, I opened my phone and typed a message to her. I didn't expect it to reach her. I didn't expect a response. I just needed to send it. Keep your spirits up. I still remember what Diddy did to us I never forgot. It felt ridiculous, sending something so personal to someone I'd only met once, briefly, in a hallway of horror. But an hour later, my phone buzzed. A reply. From Wendy. Just 2 words. Thank you. Simple. Small, but heavy. Heavy enough to break something inside me. Heavy enough to prove she remembered too. Heavy enough to confirm it wasn't all in my head. If you're still here, thank you for listening. Like, comment, and subscribe. We're almost at 100,000. Let's get there together.